And we're going to move on with a look through the top stories in the international newspapers with Flo. Hi there.
Hi, Kat.
Now, we were just talking about Greece with Stephen, its impact on the European markets. You're looking at the political side of this story.
That's right. Lots of focus on the speech that the Prime Minister made to the European Parliament yesterday. Lots of photos in the Greek press. If we take a look, first of all, at the front page of Katimerini, that's a center-right paper. They talk about how Tsipras is facing his responsibility. Ephemerida, the center-left paper, talks about a tense atmosphere, but there are signs of a budding agreement. Now, yesterday, the Greek Prime Minister promised immediate reform in the form of tax and pensions changes. And so this is the Independent's take on it. Greece blinks first in the Eurozone standoff with Germany.
I think a lot of people taking their own take on that, aren't they? Some people saying it was rather triumphant for Tsipras as well. He certainly smiled a lot anyway. So in Greece, let's talk about the ordinary people. Perhaps a growing sense of panic for some. This according to the New York Times.
That's right. This is a really interesting article that caught my eye today that focused on the fact that many Greeks, given that they don't really know what's going to happen in the future, well, they're going on a really big shopping spree. They're buying all sorts of appliances, jewelry. Some of them are even prepaying their taxes. So you can see here, Greeks are spending in droves. Why is that? Well, because they're afraid of losing their savings to a bailout. So the New York Times describes it as panic buying. Basically, they're trying to buy anything tangible that can hold value in troubled times. And what's interesting is this photo that you can see here in the New York Times is a jewelry store which recently turned down a customer who wanted to buy more than $1 million worth in jewels.
Goodness me.
Diamonds are forever.
They are indeed. Let's move on to another major story that's also had an element of panic involved in it as well. Stephen was just telling us about what's been going on in China with the stock markets.
That's right. It's really interesting to see how the Chinese press is talking about this. It is front page news in China. You can see here they're talking about the yuan hit by turmoil in the market, but this is, of course, China's leading paper. It really tries to play down the panicky aspect here. It says that this share tip is unlikely to have a major effect on the real economy or the financial system, but in many ways, the damage has already been done. If we look at other papers, for instance, this is an article in the Washington Post today. It points out that this market crash has really dented China's aura of invincibility. And if it continues, according to the Washington Post, the slump in stock prices could not only slow the economy down, it could actually undermine people's faith in the Chinese leadership and in their power.
All right, well, we call this the press review, but perhaps for the first time ever on the press review, we're going to look at a financial information website.
That's right. This is Market Watch. Stephen also often tells me about.
I'm sure you know about Market Watch, Stephen.
I do watch the markets.
Watch the markets, watches it before you. Market Watch says that this is actually just the beginning of what we're seeing in China here, partially because the government's response, the Chinese government's response so far has been somewhat clumsy. And so according to this website, well, the direction is probably going to be down, down, down. The underlying problem, and Stephen was telling us about this, is that investing culture is quite new in China, and it's quite immature, according to Market Watch. Now, what's interesting is a lot of other countries in the region are paying very close attention to what's happening in China, especially Australia. I pulled out a cartoon from the Daily Telegraph, which shows the Chinese dragon here. The Chinese shares it seems like they're about to fall down this cliff. And you can see Australians, they're hanging on for dear life, but they're not very optimistic. I've got this sinking feeling.
Very interesting. We have to see how that does impact on other countries, of course. Let's look a bit closer to home, just across the channel in the UK. The Chancellor there, the Finance Minister, George Osborne, he's unveiled a new budget, and a lot of people are having a pop.
That's right. Of course, different reactions, whether you're on the left or on the right. Let's start with the left-leaning press in the UK. Now, they're quite critical of this budget, the first conservative budget since 1997. This is the Independent. So it was always interesting to see the front pages in Britain. They really go to all sorts of levels
that
many other papers don't go. So you can see here the Chancellor of the Exchequer, like a magician, pulling this trick out of his hat. Now, he did make a surprise move by announcing a new national living wage that's going to replace the minimum wage, but he also announced some major welfare cuts and increased the overall tax rate. So if we take a look at The Guardian, the Chancellor giveth, but the Chancellor also taketh away. That's what The Guardian says. And the Daily Mail talks about Fearless George. He's slaying dragons, so the right-wing press is pretty impressed by Fearless George.
Oh, and there he is. Lovely. Very creative picture editors in the UK. Let's end this stateside. We've been talking about how Donald Trump, he wants to become the Republicans' presidential candidate, but he's still in hot water for making some very controversial comments about immigrants.
That's right. And a lot of people within the Republican Party are getting upset about these comments. You can see here the Washington Post, it reports that leaders from the Republican Party actually spent an hour on the phone with him yesterday telling him to, calm things down when it comes to talking about immigrants. They're afraid of, ruining the party image and alienating a very key constituency.
Well, he said Mexicans are rapists and thieves
and
or
thieves,
something,
all sorts.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, what's interesting, let's take a look at one last article in the Daily Beast. It reports that the Trump Tower, so a symbol of his wealth, was actually built on the backs of undocumented immigrants. Now, this is Polish immigrants who were used to clear the site where the Trump Tower is in Manhattan. So you can check that out in the Daily Beast. I guess they're accusing him a little bit of hypocrisy.
We'll have to wait and see what he has to say about that. He usually does have a comment, doesn't he? Thanks very much, Flo Villamino, with that look through the international press and a website for once. Let's move on with a short break now here on Live from Paris. Plenty more on all of our top international news stories for you when we're back.